Welcome. You have arrived at STEM City, USA, a safe and trusted community where you can find people and resources to help you become everything you are and beyond, accessible to all who reach for the stars.
SB Junior STEM Day. Mrs. Lamb, we want to protect their legacy. So, Mrs. Lamb, are you ready to give them the tour?
I am.
Awesome.
Welcome. My name is Sandra Lamb, and I'm the Executive Director of the Institute of Black Invention and Technology. We are a traveling museum, and we feature the ingenuity and creativeness of Black inventors, innovators throughout history and through the present day. And what I'd like to do is just introduce you to Henry Baker, because Henry Baker was really at the forefront of actually chronicling the inventions and innovations of Blacks. And it came about as a result of a commission that he had to do for the Paris Exposition. And what he did was he sent out letters to about more than 5,000 patent attorneys, company presidents, newspaper editors, and prominent African Americans in order to obtain this information. So as he began to get this information in, he began to chronicle it. So what I'd like to do is to thank Henry Baker. Another person I'd like to thank is also Patricia Sluby, who has written a book on the inventiveness of Black inventors. And one of the things that I'd like to do is just introduce you to the first African-American patent holders. One was Thomas J. Jennings, who was at the forerunner of today's dry cleaning procedure. And he used a dry scouring solvent to clean clothes. Unfortunately, his original patent was actually destroyed in a fire. The other person is Judy Reed. And she was the first African-American to apply for and to receive a patent. However, very little information is about her, but we do know that she invented a dough kneader roller. And those are just the very first African-American patent holders. One of the other things that I'd like to do is just to introduce you to some of the early inventors. And this is not a compilation of all of them. We have a lot more, but I just wanted to give you some idea of who they are and what they did. The first is Elijah Mccoy, and most of you may be familiar with him. But I think what is unique is that his parents were actually escaped slaves who fled to Canada, where he was born. And then when he was 15 years old, his parents sent him to Edinburgh, Scotland, where he worked as a mechanical engineer apprentice. And this was after the Emancipation Proclamation. The family moved to Ypsilanti, Michigan. Mccoy really wanted to be an engineer with the Michigan Central Railroad, but he was only offered the positions of railroad foreman and oiler. And one of the things that they had to do was every 15, 20 minutes, all the oilmen had to stop, and they used a can that looked something like this, and they had to oil all the moving parts on the train. So this was very tedious, and also it lacked time efficiency, actually. So what he did was he invented a lubricating cup. Now, he was not the first inventor of the lubricating cup, but what he was known for was really creating the best lubricating cup on the market at the time. And that's where we get the saying, the real McCoy. The next person I want to introduce you to is Granville T Woods. And he really was an inventive electrical genius. And I just want to caution you at this time that you may see things on the internet in terms of how he invented the roller coaster and some other things. He didn't do that, but what he did do, he invented the mechanisms that made it possible for those other things to be invented. Some people refer to him as the Black Edison, but he really can stand alone. One of the things that he's noted for is that he went to court with Edison on 2 different occasions. And on 2 different occasions, he won the suit. So he fought patent cases for the rights to this invention And as I said before, he won 2 of the cases against Thomas Edison. One of my favorite early inventors is Matt Zilliger, and he's from Suriname in South America. And he came from Suriname and he went across the ocean. He went to several states, but he ended up in Lynn, Massachusetts. And it was in Lynn, Massachusetts, where he was working in a Laster's company. And he noticed that the Lasters spent so much time making shoes. It took about, I guess they could make 50 pairs of shoes a day. And Matt Zilliger knew that there must be a better way to do it. So what he did was he observed how they used their fingers, how they actually, all of their movements, their arm movements, their finger movements, all of those things. He would go home and at night, he would make a prototype, and he would make a prototype using cigar boxes, wire, other boxes, or what have you. Well, one of the things that he did after making it, he was able to get funded, and he ended up making the shoe lasting machine that you see here. And what this machine could do, it could produce up to 700 pairs of shoes per day compared to the 50 pairs of skilled labor, a skilled laster could make by hand. So we know that the shoe prices dropped by nearly half, making shoes affordable to a larger number of people. Because in those days, only the wealthy could really afford to purchase shoes. And what they would do is to go to a laster, and the laster would size the person's foot, make a wooden mold of it, and then make the shoe. And what Matt Zilliger's machine did, it sold the upper to the sole, and that's what his machine allowed people to be able to do. And these are just 3 of many. There are over thousands of African American inventors. I just wanted to introduce you to those 3. And then I want to go around, and one of the things that I wanted to mention is that there was a group of people, a group of inventors who worked for Bell Laboratories. And William Massey, who's a professor at Princeton, mentioned that during the 60s and 70s and 80s, it was like a Black Renaissance. And the reason, or like the Harlem Renaissance. And the reason for that was that you had, even though there were a small percentage of Black inventors, at Bell Laboratories, you had the vast majority of Black engineers working for that company. And I just want to introduce you to some. And I missed the one over there. Anyway, the first one I want to talk about is Lincoln Hawkins. And he's the co-inventor of the plastic cable sheath. And you can see that on the table. And what this sheath does, it really helped make advances towards the reuse of plastics from retired materials. And so before, they had, it was made out of, and I should say it was made out of plastic. And because it was made out of plastic, it was subject to changes in weather. Sometimes the birds would get to it. And so it really wouldn't be functional, or it really wouldn't last a long time. When he invented this, or co-invented this, it allowed for the cable to protect the cables. And this was done, he actually was able to sell this throughout countries throughout the world. And the new coating saved billions of dollars for the company and enabled expansion of the telephone service around the world. And it continues to be used today. One of the things that I didn't mention that is important is that he was hired in 1942 by AT&T Bell Laboratories. Now, when you think about it, this was before Jackie Robinson was even hired as a baseball player. But you hear a lot about Jackie Robinson, and you don't hear very much about Lincoln Hawkins. And that's not to take away anything from Jackie Robinson, but there were people, African Americans, who made great strides in that engineering field long before, and was hired long before blacks were hired uh, in baseball. Okay. The other person I want to mention who also worked for Bell Laboratory is James West, and he was sort of like the renegade of the group because he was very outspoken. He studied at Temple and he received his degree in electrical engineering, but he interned at Bell Labs during the summers. So when he graduated, he started working directly for AT&T Bell Laboratories. And what he invented, and again, this was he co-invented it. It's called a foil electric, and this is the way it looks on the inside. So if you use a computer, if you use a telephone, if you use anything that requires the voice to be amplified or the sound to be amplified, he is responsible for it. 90% of microphones and other things that are used in microphones has his invention in it. He's in his 80s now. He retired from AT&T Bell. He's now working for Johns Hopkins Hospital. And again, he continues to have his inventive spirit, but he's like 80 or 85 at this point, but he continues to work. The other person that worked for Bell Laboratories, and I'm not going in order, so I apologize, is Jesse Russell. And he's the pioneer in the field of cellular and wireless communication. So when you're driving or if you're walking out and you see one of those towers, know that Jesse Russell is responsible for that. Jesse Russell was born in a small town and he had 10 siblings by his father and mother in Nashville, Tennessee. But his interest in school when he first started was actually in athletics. He loved sports. And it wasn't until he attended a summer educational program at Fisk University that he began to get interested in academics. And he excelled. He was the first African American hired by AT&T Bell Laboratories right out of college. So when he was hired, they sent him to Stanford University. Everything was paid for. Not only was his college education paid for, but they also paid his salary while he was in school as well. And then when he came back, he began to work and he began to advance through the corporate entity at Bell Labs. He now has his own company that he runs as well with some of his family members. So he was another product of A&T Bell. This person, another person who worked, she didn't, but I'm going to mention her. This is Dr. Jana Howard. She wears many hats. She's an engineer, professor, roboticist, and also entrepreneur. One of the things that she earned her bachelor's degree from Brown University. And when she was 27 years old, she headed a team at NASA in developing artificial intelligence for the Mars rovers. And in 2008, she received worldwide attention for her snow mote. And you can see the snow mote in the picture. And it was designed to study the impact of global warming on the Antarctic ice shelves. And presently, even though she's still a professor, she also has her own business where she makes, she has materials made for children who have learning disabilities. And these are some of the things that she carries. Okay, I think she's at Georgia Tech. The other person that I want to mention is Marion Croak. And Marion is from New York. When she was young, she really liked to tinker. And that was one of the things that I found out about most inventors, especially young ones. When they were young, they all liked to take things apart and put things together. And she was one of those people. She is known for being a pioneer in the VoIP technology. So if you've ever used FaceTime, or if you voted during, uh, oh goodness, I can't remember the name of it. Anyway, voted for American the dance. What's the dance?
America's Got Talent.
Okay, I can't.
America's Got Talent?
No, not America's Got Talent, the dancing show. Well, anyway, in order to vote, you could actually use her technology as well. She is really a proficient inventor. She has Marion has applied for over 350 patents. And at this point, I think she has over 125 patents that have been approved. But as I said before, she is a prolific inventor. She worked for A&T and T Bell for over 20 years. And then I think she was there for 32 years. And after that, she left. So she's now at Google. That's where she is. So when I mentioned before, if you've used FaceTime, if you've owned a Magic Jack, or if you donated money over the phone, she is responsible for making that possible. And all the ones that I mentioned, except Ayana, have worked for AT&T Bell. And if you do research on that company, they really made a special effort to recruit African Americans, and that was as a result of James West, really pushing for that to happen. And it was very successful. And most of the ones who actually worked for the company had a lot of good things to say, because not only did they pay for their college education as well as their salary, but when they had to, and this was for everyone at AT&T Bell, when you came time for being evaluated on a yearly basis, you just had one sheet of paper. You told them exactly what you wanted to do or what you were doing. And that's how they would evaluate your work. The doors were not open. You had a lot of people who worked cross disciplines, which also made for a very exciting atmosphere, or work atmosphere at that time. Okay. One other person that I want to mention is Otis Boykin. And Otis Boykin does not necessarily receive a lot of acclaim, but he patented more than 25 electronic devices. You can see him at work here over the course of his career. But what he's mostly noted for was a device used to actually maintain a regular heartbeat. And so he was also, and some of the other ones that I mentioned are also in the Inventors Hall of Fame, but he was inducted into the National Inventors Hall of Fame in 2014, but he had died at that by that time. And so that just gives you an overall view of some of the things that we have in our exhibit. There's also, we have something called the 20 Under 20, where we feature young African-American entrepreneurs and innovators. And you can just see some of them here, starting with Maya Penn. And Sandra Cunningham, she's founder and CEO of Zandra Beauty. She was one of the first entrepreneurs that we had speak at our Girls STEAM Entrepreneurship Summit. And each year we have that for girls between the ages of 9 and 12, where they come and they interact with African American women who are in the field of STEAM, but we also have a young female entrepreneur who speaks as a highlight. So I'd like to thank you for coming to just see a little bit of what we do. You can visit us at www.tibet.biz. That's www.tibet.biz on our website. And I can be contacted, Sandra Lamb, at 816-550-3733 if you'd like to contact us. Thank you. Goodbye.
Welcome. You have arrived at STEM City USA, a safe and trusted community where you can find people and resources to help you become everything you are and beyond, accessible to all who reach for the stars.